chime in. What is an important piece you feel like people should know to access the film fully?
So the thing that I want folks to take away from the film is this idea that minhag, that custom, that was rich and diverse, that developed because of Jewish communities living across the world and developing cultures across the world in relationship to the places where they lived, the people that they lived alongside with. That the Zionist project, had um, created this unified culture that was very intentional, um, and that we might think of cultural work as being essential
Mm.
to creating the vibrant liberatory Judaism that we need and want today, and that we do that
Mm.
by replicating what was historically true, that Jews developed their cultures in vibrant relationship in the places and with the people alongside the people that they lived. And Isaac Jerusian, who I mentioned earlier, and again, I think I'm mispronouncing his name, but maybe I'll put it in the chat. Um, he talked about Chavruta as like the model that we might think about this, right? That like we think about um, studying Torah and Chavruta as being a way in partnership in pairs, as being a way of sharpening our thinking, and that we should think about the communities that we live alongside as functioning in the same way, to like sharpen our
Mm.
thinking, to sharpen our understanding of what Judaism is, of what Judaism could be. And it felt so resonant to me with, my hopes for what culture making um, can do, can be, and the ways that I see culture like effectively being used by the political movements that I find most vibrant and successful. And I think that the Zionist movement was so successful in creating this new identity, and that we can be as successful by creating new liberatory culture. And that's just one piece of the work that we have to do. But I think that's one thing I think the film like demonstrates the power of culture to do that. That culture is a driver. Minhag shares the root with the word to drive. It's a driver of the worlds that
Mm.
we want to bring into being.
Mm. Beautiful, beautiful. Let's do it. I want to put that there and be like, what would that look like? Right. I have a million questions to that. But
Yeah.
first, let's go to hear from everybody about this question. Sasha,
I actually think I want to kick it to the director first before I
okay.
answer. Just
Okay,
as
great. Great.
But Sasha, I was so curious what you were going to say. But okay, sure. I have been thinking a lot about time. Of course, I opened that way, but and it relates to questions that always come up around this moment and what the film means in this moment. So I want to share that the body of work that is referenced in this film that Hadar created began in 2014, right? Hadar? Or yeah. And was created, she can speak more to it, but in response to a lot of political organizing that was going on in that moment around the 2014 assault on Gaza. And then I started filming in 2017, and that was motivated by my own multi multiple political processes and awakenings, and the intersection of a lot of other organizing that was going on in my life, around whiteness and my own Jewish American identity. And then the film really took 7 years to make. And so I just want to name that as a framing that all of the labor, all of the organizing labor that preceded Hadar's creating of this work, all of the labor that the film did for 7 years that preceded this moment. And I don't know what we do with that because relationship building and processing things in our bodies is slow and urgency is needed with this horrific political moment. And it has been horrific, right? It's just been degrees. Um, so I guess I just want people to know how much time is archived here and if somehow we can hold these different timescales in our bodies and not lose sight of it, because the urgency will keep coming and keep creating panic and have no solutions for this. But I think that it's important that we hold different timescales so that we can really see and feel change, even as we struggle to make things happen that are not happening that we'd like to see in our lifetime.
Hmm. Thank you for that, Tatyana. Sasha, do you want to chime in before we move on to a different
Yeah, I
film?
think I'm going to combine both of those, and this might be the editor in me, but what I would want people to know is that stories and journeys take time, and editing and filmmaking flatten a lot of that. And there's a lot of desire to get to the end without watching the process, because you want to feel safe in knowing where their journey is going to be. And sometimes that's not possible. And that sometimes we have to sit with the discomfort of someone's journey that is messy and doesn't start in the right place or where we would want it to. And that we need to have the grace to allow people to have their stories and their journeys, because no one is going to start where you think that they need to be.
Hmm. Wow. You know what? That was one of the things that I did notice about the film was that it felt maybe deliberately, maybe one of you could speak to this, that it didn't like wrap up, right? It was like a little bit more like an ellipses, right? I'm like, and I think in particular, I was interested about the way in which the relationship with the way the Dobka troupe that you all intermingled with, like that relationship also didn't come to a like it wasn't like, and then we figured out how these things intersect, right? And then it was like tied in a bow. So I think I'd be curious to hear about the intentionality around or if you think or if you would disagree, or if you think I'm reading it wrong as far as the ellipses in the story of just like, this is opening something up and then like, let's continue. Um, so I'm curious about that. And then also if you could another of you, or both of you, however you want to speak to the process of weaving in the Freedom Dobka troupe, because I feel like that was such an essential element of the film. Like it really would have been a very different film without that. Like, and I think, even though it felt like that story was happening kind of in parallel to the other story, right? It didn't feel like as interwoven. So I'd love to hear about when you integrated the Dobgood troupe and how that relationship was forged and how that got connected. So whoever wants to jump in on that front.
I think we all have different things we could offer for this question. It's a great question. So
Great.
I'll do some and then we can join. Um, I think it was a process for me as a friend and filmmaker, and my filmmaking practice comes out of a day job that I had for many years, making artist profiles in the studio with artists at residency centers. And so I'm very used to staying inside of the artist's materials when I make these 5-minute portraits. And I don't go outside of that. And this is how this project started. But because of my identity and my friendship with Hadar, it quickly became something much, much bigger. And so it was a process for me of understanding that there could be a parallel space there. And we talked about it with Hadar. We talked about it without Hadar. Bridget Green, our film producer, is also on this call. We talked about it for years. And there was process around it. There was a conversation that I had with two dancers in the El Fanoun dance troupe in Ramallah in the West Bank, who I had met in a project 10 years before, completely separate experience, Dubka dancers. And I talked to them about the film. They talked to me about normalization. We had a little political chat, and they, sent me off with some prompts around making the audience feel their absence and making them feel the imbalance of power. And we kind of circled around that for a few years and tried things and it didn't work and or it did work, but it didn't work. And at a certain point, we just kind of cold decided to reach out to Freedom Dupka Group. They're very active in the New York, New Jersey, just greater New York area. And we'd been following them for a while just on social media. And that that was a big leap that the film team took. And it was necessary, as you said, Alissa, for the film to grow and to become what it was. Um, I guess I can let someone else speak because I could say a lot about it. Sasha actually came on to editing because the editing took many years when we had only shot one scene with Freedom Dupka Group. So we were really building the story out as we were shooting and building in conversation with Freedom Dupka Group. It was very much a dialogue with them. And they also saw a version of the film and offered feedback. So it was very transparent in that way. And Sasha had the job of thinking about how this was going to structurally work and make sense. So I can throw it to Sasha to chime in.
It's a very ambitious film. It has a lot of threads and a lot of characters, and some characters we had to leave behind, and some storylines we had to leave behind. And I had the lucky job of being the person that had no emotional attachment to any of them and could tell Tatyana and Bridget that, like, sweet, but this has got to go. And really honed in on the stories of that are told there. I'm blanking on the two women's names, so sorry. But the Freedom Dupka Group, out of pure love and persistence from Bridget and Tatyana, became a much bigger part of it. And because we were editing at October 7th before and after, I think they were more available to have these conversations that was really held beautifully by Tatyana and Bridget to include them. And then I had the lucky job of having these parallel stories that don't intersect. And something that Hadar says in the movie that I think about all the time is there are no equivalencies, but there are parallels. And I think that really, like, that quote shaped the way that the parallel stories are told without intersecting until the very end, sort of intersecting.
That's so beautiful. I just
Yeah.
want to add one more thing back to this conversation I had with the Ramallah-based dancers. There's something about the not resolve that feels like it is an imperative, and the difference between delivering like a release to the audience versus leaving them in a place where that desire to connect with other humans is so palpable and real, and how do we leave with that charge? And I think Sasha, who edited the final sequence, did an incredible job with that.
Mm. Beautiful. Hadar, do you want to add anything on this piece? Um, well, one of the things actually you were just talking about, Sasha, that I wanted to ask about was about the chronology of the film and the and I guess the editing process. Because, obviously one thing I really noticed, of course, was that the October 7th wasn't mentioned in the film, right? It seemed like it really was a film that kind of like so many things resonate, like even without it being about post October 7th, right? A lot of the descriptions of relationship to Palestine and the conditions on the ground, right, are referenced. And there's language around ethnic cleansing, but nothing about genocide. And so I wanted to ask you about how you thought about that and if you think something would have changed. Like, was there a moment where you thought about it? And I'm thinking about this from my own personal experience of I wrote a book that I turned in the manuscript in September 2023. This was about Israel, like the book I wrote about Israel Palestine, and we turned in the manuscript in September 2023, and I um, and we delayed publishing it because it felt weird to do an anti-Zionist Jewish book in during a genocide to publish it. And then ultimately was like, actually, this is gonna be going on for a while. So then we did publish it, but we like didn't rewrite the whole book, but we wrote a little bit about like, so I just have this experience of going through this process of understanding like there was this whole piece of work that happened before the world kind of turned upside down. So I wonder if you could one of you could speak to any deliberations that kind of happened behind the scenes related to the ongoing genocide or whatever experiences or conversations about what would it mean to put out a film like this during the genocide, and if you think how you think the story might have changed. And I guess that question really is a question about how has your relationship to the topic changed in the past couple of years, so you could also answer that. Hadar, do you want to jump in on that question since we didn't hear you on the last one?
Yeah, I guess I did think of something I would have said for the last one. So I'll say
Okay.
that, and then maybe I'll pass to Tatyana and Sasha this question. Which is that it felt, yeah, important. I loved what Tatyana said about like leaving that desire for connection. And people do leave the film, saying like, oh, then is the answer for us just to dance together? And that's not the answer. Like Dafka, like actually what the film shows is that like there's so much work that needs to be done before it would have been possible for me to meet, Freedom Doc Group, which I now have, and was there when we screened the film for them. I couldn't have done that when I started making this work. There was so much work that I needed to do to understand my power, my privilege in this situation, and it wouldn't have made sense to invite them to be in my dance piece, which is something that I had thought about doing when I was a young choreographer. Like, oh, let me give over the mic. But even giving over the mic would have been a way of centering myself in the story by having them in my space of authorship. And so the film enabled us to have a space where they were speaking, for themselves. Tatyana is still the director, but I think the relationship that they built was so important. Um, and yeah, just for us to think about, I think the boycott movements like anti-normalization policy is really uncomfortable for people, and I think it's really important for us to understand as Jews, and for myself as an Israeli citizen also, um, what it means, like the kind of work it's going to take for us to live in the kind of societies that we imagine, where we can live alongside each other. That there's a lot of work of dismantling supremacy that we Jews need to do before we get there. Um,
Can
so
you say, I just want to make sure everybody who's part of this conversation knows what normalization means when you say
yeah,
that. Could you
great.
just like
Thank you.
unpack it a tiny bit? Yeah.
Yeah. So the normalization is the idea, or like when, right, there was a lot of money for projects in the Oslo era to bring Jews and Palestinians together to do coexistence work, um, or what's called coexistence work. And what that work kind of predicated is this idea that the only problem is that we need to talk to each other and get to know each other. Um, and it didn't challenge any of the power structures at play, right? That Israeli citizens have legal rights in Israel that Palestinians do not have, right? The Palestinians are second-class citizens, that they cannot vote for, uh, sorry, they're able,
Leadership. Yeah.
right, that they don't have full equal citizenship in the state of Israel, which is, you know, um, a democracy only in name. Um, right, there are millions of people living under occupation. And so the idea of normalization being that the past, what folks refer to as normalization is the idea that all we need to do is to bring people together before, um, right, to like change society. But actually what needs to happen before the relationships can come into being is for there to be a change in the power relationships, for Jews to let go of some of the power that we have and to give and share power. Um, so like a framework that people use is like instead of coexistence is co-resistance, that Jews need to also be working to dismantle Jewish supremacy in the land before it might be possible for Jews and Palestinians to be in a room working together towards a shared future. So any kind of work together would need to be predicated on shared principles. And the BDS movement has particular guidelines around how um, how to be in that kind of right relationship.
Thanks, Hadar. Tatyana or Sasha, do you either of you want to weigh in this question about the relationship to the political moment and the genocide as it relates to how you thought about editing the film or releasing the film?
Do you want to go first, Sasha?
Yeah, I think the piece that I'll add is there's an idea of trying to make a film that's evergreen, that you can watch it at any point and not know exactly when in the world is placed. I think one of the things that is probably missed by most audiences is there is actually a mention of genocide. There's also a mention of a destruction of Gaza, and those are not about 2023. They are about 2020,
Or,
uh,
uh,
20, because this film covers so many years and because this is ongoing, right? Like the things that are coming up from the Freedom Dabka group were interrelated and also from any time. Like, and I think that I hope people understand that. And there's moments of montage and Amy Goodman and the right of return, like all
right,
of these, moments, but they could be happening right now. Like that this isn't like an exception what's happening in 2023 or what started in 2023, but that it has been going on.
right.
Um, and I don't know how well that comes across in the film, but I think that was a decision we made to try and push that so that it felt like this is happening all the time because it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll just add like, how do I want to frame this? Because this is a very specific way of into this subject matter through dance and the body. The sort of referencing this concrete event could very easily have hijacked the film in a certain way. It also like literally we had one more shoot on the books and it was like the week after October 7th and it was Freedom Dupka Group in the park. That was just something they were planning, they were scheduled to do. So just from the perspective of us wrapping production, like there was just no way we could cover it. But as Sasha said, we had already made a decision to have a more evergreen approach, which is a really sad, depressing thing to say, right? When the film opens with text that Hadar wrote in 2014 that talks about the Nakba, and it sounds like it's talking about this moment. And so, that 2014 date comes up very quickly. The film is very dense, but people, have asked us, is that about how is it talking about this moment? And so there's just many times that the bell is chiming on that point where nothing is new. These ideas, the writing has been on the wall. Um, but I do want to speak to this ethnic cleansing moment because, and I will take full responsibility for that, and I'll just be transparent, which is that that day in the park when we spoke to the member of Freedom Dubka Group who is sort of the spokesman of the day is Amer's younger brother, Boots is what he goes by. He it was very emotional. He was struggling. Sasha saw all of that footage. It was very raw and we didn't have a lot of time to bring it in again, and we were just trying to be not open too many wormholes. And I think in that moment, he was listing a bunch of words. And what he did say, it's genocide, and he said it's ethnic cleansing, and he was like, yes, all of this is true, knowing that all of these words are, what's the word? delegitimized by the media. And this was also a moment where the word ceasefire was controversial. So I just made a decision as the director to go for ethnic cleansing because we could choose what we wanted him to say. He said many things. And I was thinking strategically. I don't know if you have feelings about that, Alissa, or if this can loop into anything, but in that moment, I was like, who do I want to see this film, and what is the word that I feel like can be at the edge of what they will tolerate? And that's what I chose. So there was a curation that happened there, but it could have easily been genocide.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, it was interesting to watch from that perspective as far as, you know, my my life and my work has really been marked by these moments of escalation, right? Over the years of my work doing Palestine solidarity work, you really could map it to Israeli aggression in Gaza when a new cohort of Jews join the Palestine solidarity movement, right? And so I feel like I was hyper attuned to that, right? Of like, oh, the 2014 moment, oh, this moment, right? Like, and I think that it's both on the one hand, I want to hold that it's on the one hand true that descriptions of the Nakba, like the Nakba wasn't a moment in time that ended in 1948, right? It's an ongoing Nakba that has continued to torment Palestinians since that time. And it feels like we also need to hold that something really different is happening in this moment, right? Like of going from um a situation of siege and apartheid and occupation to a campaign of genocide is a different moment, right? And I think it takes it out of some of the parallels that have been made to South Africa, because in South Africa, apartheid didn't move to a stage of genocide. So it feels like we need to both hold that it is a different moment and it's a continuation of a set of violence that so I think it's hard. It's a challenging thing. So I just wanted to ask it to kind of understand that. And I think like part of, the question is like, how do we, you know, I guess not normalize the, these political conditions, right? And like insist that they could be different, right? So some of these questions, like I was asking before about when do you release the film or these things, and like what I was sharing about my own process with my book is like, what are the ethics in a solidarity practice of doing cultural reclamation or of doing cultural of community building in a time of genocide? Like how does that work, right? Like is it ethical to like be putting our, these are things that we struggle with, but at the same time I think, you know it was such a beautiful offer. It's like, it's not to undercut anything about the film's offering and like the conversation that it opened up. I do want to open up for other people to have questions, but I am, as I said before, I warned you I was going to indulge in question asking. So before I do, I just want to get well at least one more of my questions in, take my privilege. But please put in the chat if you have questions you want to ask, or even raise your hand if you want to ask them yourself with your voice. I think I just want to ask, and I guess maybe this is primarily for Hadar, but it sounds like all of you have relationships with Israeli folk dance in different ways. I watched the film many months ago, and I rewatched it last night, actually with my kid who goes to um, a Yiddish socialist summer camp where they do folk dancing. And I was watching it with them. They're about to go to camp for 7 weeks. And so we were talking about it. We watched the film together, and we're kind of talking. They're like, oh my gosh, we do that step. Oh, we do this dance. And like, then at the end, it was kind of a conversation of like, is it okay that we do this? Like, is it wrong? Like, they were kind of left with some of these questions of like, should we not do these dances? And and I think they were able to hold the complexity of like, no, there are some that are Yiddish. They were like, no, there's some that are Yiddish dances, and that's what we do. And then there was a song that you played, I can't remember which one. They were like, oh wait, we do that one. Is that Hebrew? Should we not do that one? Right. So it's kind of like left with this question of like, well, what do we do now, right, with this cultural inheritance, and how to not do baby in the bathwater? Because I want them, like, they go to a camp, it's called Kinderland, that is like over 100 years old and is predates like the foundation of the state of Israel and is very much rooted in a secular Yiddish culture that included folk dance, right? So it's like there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to access that cultural inheritance. So it's kind of like, but it doesn't look right. It doesn't look great because it does like there is that like Marasayan, it's like it doesn't look, it's like the evil eye is hovering and it's like, doesn't, is there something uncouth about it? So I'd love maybe Hadar, you could start with how you relate to that.
Yeah, thank you. I feel a little sad that people leave the film feeling like, oh my gosh, is it okay for me to do folk dancing? And also glad that they like recognize like the power of it. And yeah, part of my process after the film has been a reclamation of Yiddish culture and Yiddish dance and davening. Um, and there are specific moments when I still do Israeli dancing, and that's with my mom, like at my sister's wedding, and at my own wedding. We did El Ginat Goz, which is like one of my mom's favorite songs and dances, and I like feel like it's one that I specifically like trace the lineage of that dance to Sarah Levi Tanai, who like choreographed that dance. I feel like I now have like the information, like I know what's going on with the dances, and I feel like I'm making a fully conscious choice about where, how I'm doing it, the context of it, right? Like what made the, um, I think the problem with the dance is like the context in which they were formed, like the project of erasing diversity of Jewish life, and then presenting this new Israeli culture as to like deny that there was like other culture or life there in Palestine, um, that, Jews had come and revived this place. So I feel like I'm gonna take a moment to center and think about, um, yeah, I feel like the film I hope encourages people to like research their own histories of movement and dance. Um, and Yeah, and to say that like also like Yiddish dance is not necessarily this like authentic thing, but it's a thing that I felt like I was denied access to. And so it's a thing that I has felt important to me to reclaim. Um and yeah, like there are people who we did the screening at the JCA, the Jewish community of Amherst. And after the screening, they announced the Israeli dancing was happening next Monday. And um, and yeah, do you want to jump in, Tatyana?
And the woman who championed the film and brought it there
Yeah.
is a grew up doing Israeli folk dance and runs. Yeah, there was a beautiful multiplicity happening.
Yeah, right. Like I know, right, these dances at a certain point, I think they're like powerful because they function to continue the narrative, and also they're fulfilling social functions that people need in so many ways. Um, I don't feel like I can do them anymore. And right, except for those like specific contexts. And um, yeah, and I hope for people to like reclaim, the cultures they have. I feel like, like whether your daughter chooses to like sit in or out of like a specific dance is like her choice. I used to invite people onto the stage at the end of the dances to learn a dance with me, and I got because I wanted them to have like an embodied experience of it. And I heard from people, well, like, why would I want to do that now that I've experienced the violence, or now that I've learned like the violence that undergirds the processes of these dances? And it like, it changed me and my relationship to it. But I feel like, each person is in a different place in that process. Um,
Mm.
so yeah, I won't make the call. Like I'm so grateful that that person from the Jewish community of Amherst is both, right, like continuing to bring people together to move their bodies and was willing to bring this film. So I feel like, we another thing that I really learned through the process of making this film and collaborating with everybody in it is to like the integrity of each person's experience, feeling in their body, like driving their relationship to what they wanted to do with their body, for people having agency to decide. what to do with their bodies. And I think that having more information gives us more ability to make like cogent decisions about that. Um,
Mm,
yeah.
lovely. Tatyana, do you wanna or Sasha wanna chime in on this question of relationship to dance now?
I think Hadar answered beautifully, and I want to have time for audience questions.
Great. Cool.
Yeah.
All right, audience. It's your turn to ask some questions. Does anybody have a question they'd like to ask? You can put it in the chat and I'd read it for you, or you can raise your hand and ask it yourself.
Well, I'll definitely answer the first one. Yeah, I think I I didn't meet Freedom Dafka Group until after the film was done. And as we mentioned, it felt important to honor the reality of that we didn't have a relationship and to not rush into a relationship. And I think that's true for the dialogue that we imagine with Palestinians. Like we might not all be ready to have that conversation. Like in order for us to be ready to have that conversation, and there are many examples of it happening, and I think this film was right. It's like it's not about dialogue. It was a film or like my work. I'll speak to my work and then where Tatyana picked up. It was not about imagining a future dialogue. It was about a process of coming to responsibility with a lineage, with a history, with a politic that I am moving away from. And I wasn't ready in that moment in my process to be in dialogue with Palestinians. And it was work that I needed to do and work I needed to do in relationship to other Jews and work that I felt like other Jews and other Israelis needed to see. It was like, in a way, it was like an internal conversation that I was having with the Jewish community. And for us, especially for Ashkenazi Jews, for white Ashkenazi Jews, to think about our responsibility, the power that we have, the um, and so it didn't make sense, right, to rush into that dialogue. Like I think there are people doing that work, and I have tremendous respect for it. And um, that that was not the goal of this work. The goal of this work was to, the question came was like, how is the Nakba like present in my cultural inheritance? Like it seems like a historical thing. I understand it to be the thing that is at the root of what feels intractable about the conflict, quote unquote, is our inability to face our responsibility for the Nakba, for the displacement of Palestinians, and for the way that the ongoing violence that Israeli society government subjects Palestinians to.
Mhm.
And so that feels important to tend to before we can be in conversation or dance together. And I was there as a participant of that DAPCA workshop, which was so beautiful that right, like it was that they were holding this workshop. I think it was October 11th or 14th, as a way for them to share their resilience and their way of celebrating Palestinian life, and that they were inviting so generously anybody who was there, right? They weren't saying no Jews or Israelis can participate in this workshop. It was open. It was at Prospect Park, right? The fact that I could come and honor them and their practice in that way, um, that was a real gift. We all I'll leave it at that. Maybe Tatyana can speak to the other
Wait,
people.
did your mom see the film?
My mom has seen pieces of all the scenes that she is a part of, and I've been waiting to be able to visit her and be with her in person to show her the full film, and that has yet to happen.
And
But
Zayeva Cohen offered to be a bridge, a generational bridge in that viewing. We'll see if
yeah,
it pans out, but it was a beautiful offer.
yeah. And I'll say that she has met Tatiana and that she gave the green light for all of that footage be to be used. Yeah.
I just wanted to piggyback on some things that are just said. about Freedom Debka group and this idea of dialogue. And because we're here in this exclusive conversation, back to this thing about timelines and what is seen and what is on stage and what is backstage. And Freedom Debka Group hosted a screening of the film, of the finished film, with their group. The two sort of directors of the group had already seen it, but they screened it for this group of men. Some of them are quite young, like just right out of high school. The night and Hadar was there, and several members of the cast were there. And they welcomed us in and hosted us beautifully. And there was at least one member of the group visiting from Palestine who only spoke Arabic. And it was huge. It was hugely generous, and there was some dialogue that happened after the screening in a very organic way on the street where the cigarette breaks happen, and it was beautiful. And then we left, and I know that there was a lot of dialogue that happened that Amer and Hamuda took responsibility for, you know, facilitating with their group. And I just want to name that, their leadership, their decision to be a part of this. And that means, talking about that decision with the group. And, there were people in the group who were really intrigued and were like, I didn't know a lot of this history. And there were some who were very confused. And so there's a lot of agency that's being navigated, and not all of it is visible, but it's real and it's tangible and it is a form of organizing. So I just wanted to share that.
Mm. Thanks. So I know we're just about out of time. This has been so fun to dissect. I love getting into I wish we could do this all the time. Every time we watch a film, is just get to interrogate everybody about all the little details. I love a good backstory. Sarah's raising this kind. Oh yeah, the jaw-dropping scene exactly of when your mom is on that Christian Zionist TV show, which is really quite a intense. Um, so Sarah's asking about that. And then Janet is adding on to that. I know we don't have a ton of time to get into these questions, but I don't know if there's like a tiny bit you could say before we close out, Hadar, about
Yeah.
that piece.
Um, I mean, so it's interesting. I didn't know about that footage. Tatyana found it, but when I were living in Honolulu, my mom, there were evangelical Christians and Messianic Jews and like all sorts of folks on the spectrum, Christian Zionists on the spectrum of relationship to Judaism, who were part of the Israeli folk dance group that she led. And I remember like a moment of her making a decision about that, or I remember a moment of thinking like, wow, my mom is being really generous, trusting these people to be a part of our group, like the Jews for Jesus, and that they became some of my parents' closest friends. Um, and so it felt like an ideological leap to me at the time. And, looking back, I'm like, oh, of course, like their natural allies were other Zionists. It's a very small Jewish community. They were actually more connected to these people who were ideologically driven Zionists than some of the other American Jews who were living in Honolulu. Um, and it's one of the things that, inspires me to think about like the kind of coalition building work that we do at Rabbis for Ceasefire is like, okay, how can we build a big leftist coalition? Like, let's not just leave that tactic to the folks on the right. We can do that too. And I feel like we've done that really powerfully. And I think also, yeah, that scene of like seeing the appropriation of shofars, of the horns, of the prayer shawls. Whenever I get like confused about cultural appropriation being okay or not okay, I think about those moments and the way it
Yeah.
feels in my body and my
I
aversion to
know.
it.
I
I'm
was
like,
like
ah,
yelling at
okay.
the screen, like, take off the talit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, which is like what the difference between, right, like cultural exchange with our Christian, like we have Christian allies, right? But like what the difference is in the cultural exchange that we do there and that is, right? And
Right.
like the line is so fine, but it's real and we can feel it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, this is a perfect segue for
Right.
me to invite everybody into join us in DC as the Christians United for Israel Summit is happening July 5th through 7th. And we are part of the Interfaith Action for Palestine, Rabbis for Ceasefire, that is. Um, there's going to be a big interfaith mobilization, the third annual one, to counter the Christians United for Israel annual summit. You can go to that website and learn more about it and consider if you live near DC, even relatively, um, please come join us. It's going to be a cool couple days of gathering. And while I'm doing these, like using this segue,
Mhm.
also want to invite you all, if you live in one of these cities. So this is Interfaith Action is in DC. For the upcoming Jewish holiday of Tisha B'Av, there's going to be public rituals in Boston, Chicago, Denver, Durham, Kansas City, Philadelphia, and Seattle. So, if you live in any of those places and would like to join up with Rabbis for Ceasefire for a public ritual of grief, solidarity in a time of genocide and ethnic cleansing as part of your Tisha B'Av observance, please join us. So those are two links in the chat of ways to continue to take action with Rabbis for Ceasefire in this time of moral reckoning and rage. Bridget, I'd love to invite you, the producer of the film, if you can come off mute and share with us how folks can stream it or share with their people how to stream the film and see it.
Yes, thank you all. The film is on, we're using this platform called Kinema, which is kind of a new platform for folks who are self-distributing their films, which is much more the norm these days. So it's really easy to book a screening in your own community. You can book a virtual, in-person screenings, virtual screenings, or on demand, which is what this was, where the film's available for like a span of time. Um, and You can have folks, you can either pay a licensing fee or you can even set up ticketing through Kinema, so you don't have to pay up front. You can charge people, I think that the minimum is $10 for a ticket. So there's various kind of configurations and ways to make it kind of accessible and affordable for your communities to be able to watch the film. So we sort of are wrapping up like our touring phase, and this screening was a way for us to sort of galvanize and share with everybody kind of how to book a screening on your own. So we hope that you can, even bring it, have it at in your living room,
Yeah.
have folks gather, and we'll be releasing some educational material soon, as well, probably maybe sometime later this year, and then the film will eventually be able to stream also, like individually, probably later this fall too. So yeah, thanks so much.
Wonderful. Thanks. Thanks, Bridget. And to close us, Hadar, I want to invite you to bless us out. It'll be such a treat to end with your voice. And so I just want to say thank you to all of you who made this film and this offering. Thanks to everybody who showed up to this conversation. Really grateful to be in this discernment and project of liberatory Jewishness building with all of you. Hadar, to you.
So grateful for this and for this community. So I want to invite folks to maybe look away from the screen, to lower their gaze, or close their eyes, or look at an object in your space, and to notice your body, um, and your breath, and a place that feels open or settled or charged. Just a place in your body that's asking for your attention, and to breathe into it. And I'll invite us to feel a place in our body where we feel some hope. about the kind of Judaism that we want to live into. And if there's a way that that feels in your body or makes your body want to move or change shape, to let yourself do that. Or if you're sinking deeper into stillness, to do that. And to give ourselves a sense memory of the learning we've done, of the conversations we've had, the kind of actions that we hope will reverberate across generations to help us create new stories of what's possible. And that our bodies might be one place alongside the people in our lives that we return to when we need a memory, when we need a reminder of what that can look like, what that can feel like. I invite you to take one more breath and maybe look around at the Zoom room before we close. Thank you all so much for being here.